Okay, open your Bibles with me, please, to Genesis chapter 4. We're going to start in verse 3. Well, let's just start at verse 1. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. In other words, I have received a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Okay, now see, they had two different jobs, two different roles. Okay. Now, verse 3. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain, who was the tiller of the ground, brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, meaning angry, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, why are you wroth? Why are you angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, shall you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lies at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And of course, we know the rest of the story, and what Cain did to his brother Abel. But what I want to point out here is, a lot of people, I think they either make the assumption or they kind of like to say that tithing is under the law. And, hey, now that we're in the new covenant, we've been redeemed from the law. So, hey, we don't have to tithe. And they're right in one respect. I mean, certainly they don't have to tithe. You don't have to tithe. I don't have to tithe. Nobody has to tithe. Nobody has to do anything. Listen, you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. Okay? Now, will there be consequences, good or bad, based on what you do and don't do? Of course. But nobody has to do anything. You don't have to tithe. I don't have to tithe. Did Cain and Abel have to tithe? I mean, technically, no. They didn't have to. But they did. Now, of course, we know the difference between their two tithes was, listen, Abel came and he brought the firstlings of his flock, meaning that the very first, you could say, produce production increase that he received, of that he immediately brought to the Lord. But at this time, there is no law. And this is the first time a tithe is given. And yet here there is no law in effect. Moses hasn't even been born yet. How can the law have been given? Okay. Now, go with me to Genesis 14. I want to show you this. And look at verse 20. And just to set the stage for you here, what this is talking about is where there were, I believe it was four kings had some kings had gone into battle against each other, and they ended up taking Lot and his family. And so Abram finds out about this, or I think now is Abram, nope, still Abram, has not been changed his name to Abraham yet, but Abram finds out, so he, I mean, he arms his 318 servants, and they go after these kings, and of course they pursue and they overtake them, and they get Lot back, and as a result, in those times, as we've talked about in the past with David and others, when they win the battle, what do is they take all the spoil from those that they've conquered. Not right now, sweetie. Okay. And so what happens is they go and they collect all the spoil, all the gold and the silver and the jewelry and all the cattle, all these different things, all the spoil. And so here is Abram, and in verse 18, he goes to Melchizedek, king of Salem. And in verse 20, it says, this is Melchizedek speaking to Abram. He says, and blessed be the Most High God, which has delivered your enemies into your hand. See, Melchizedek recognized that God delivered Abram's enemies into his hand. And the next statement, it says, and he, meaning Abram, gave him tithes of all. So he gave a tithe of everything that they accumulated unto Melchizedek. Now, I'm not going to go into this tonight, maybe some other time, but if you read in Hebrews chapter 7, that's where it talks about how Jesus is now our Melchizedek, and he's the one that receives our tithes and our offerings. But I want you to see this here. Notice what this says. It says in verse 20, and he gave him tithes of all. It didn't say he owed him tithes of all. And I know we can look at Malachi 3:8-10, where it talks about how they had been robbing God because they had not been giving their tithes and offerings. But what I'm trying to do here is I want to renew your mind to the reality that your tithe is something that you give. It is not a debt that you owe to God, okay? It is something that you give to God of a willing heart. Because if you don't give it to God, how can you transfer it from your hands into God's hands unless you give it to him? So I want you to see your tithes, both your tithes and your offerings, as seed that you are sowing, as something that you are freely and willingly giving and offering unto the Lord. Okay, it's not just something, well, yeah, I got my paycheck, I got to give my 10% to God. No, that's not how we treat that. That's not how we treat that. And I'm going to show you something more about this. Okay, so that's Abram now. Okay, so now we've first seen Cain and Abel, and they gave the tithe, and now we see Abram doing it. Okay, now go to Genesis 28. And again, all of this is before the law. Okay, it's not a law thing. Now, we're going to look at, okay, Now we're going to look at, okay, we're going to look at verse 20. Okay, so this is talking about Jacob here. Okay, so we have Cain and Abel, then we have Abram. Now we're talking about Jacob. Okay, now Jacob says, or it says in verse 20 in regards to Jacob, and Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and a raiment to put on, so that I may come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you shall give me, I will surely give the tenth unto you. Now watch, this is powerful now. I want you guys to really see this. This is huge. Now listen, this is not at this time, now just previously, later in chapter 27, earlier in chapter 28, Isaac had just blessed Jacob. Okay, Jacob at this point is not wealthy. Okay, he don't hardly have anything. Now he has the blessing, okay, that his father Isaac has put on him, but right now he is not a wealthy man. So it's not like he's sitting there going, well, Lord, hey, you blessed me so much, so I'm gonna give back to you. No. Jacob is making this vow to the Lord before he even has anything. Before he has anything. Now, I want you to see this. What is Jacob doing here? Now, it says he's well, before I say that, let me just, again, I want you to look at the very last sentence in verse 22. And of all that you shall give me, I will surely give the tenth unto you. See, the tithe is something that Jacob gives to the Lord. It's something that he has committed to give to the Lord. He doesn't say, I will pay you. Well, gotta pay my tithe. Man, listen, we gotta stop. Our words are so powerful. And how we describe what we do with the tithe is a very big deal. So when we say things like, well, got paid today, so gotta pay my tithe, gonna pay my tithe right away, gotta get it in. Well, okay, wait a minute now. And again, this is not a condemnation thing. This is just simply us correcting our thinking, renewing our minds to treating the tithes and our offerings as holy unto the Lord, because that's what they are. Okay? That's all we're doing here. Hey, listen, believe me, nobody's coming down on, I'm not coming down on anybody here. That's not the point of all this. The point is that we're just taking our reverence for God up to a higher level. We're taking our reverence for our tithes and offerings that we give to the Lord up to a higher level. Okay? But when we use that kind of language, we're lowering our tithe down to the level of paying the electric bill or the gas bill, or the internet bill, or paying the mortgage. See, that's not what we're going to do. Because we're going to treat our offerings to the Lord as gifts, as special, as holy, and blessed, and anointed as they are. Remember, we read last week in Leviticus 27, it said that the tithe is holy unto the Lord. And that's how we're going to treat that. Because we do things God's way. That's just what we do. That's what we do. We just do things God's way. And that's his way. But I want you guys to see it. So there's so much more in this. Now, I want to read this last sentence again. He says, of all that you shall give me, I'm going to give a tenth back to you. Now, I want you to see this now. What is this here? What is he doing? Jacob. This is deep. This is powerful, you guys. I saw this today. This vow that Jacob made in regards to the tithe, what he was doing was he was making a covenant with God. Now, watch this. Tithing is a covenant action. It binds you into covenant with God. Wow. I mean, that is powerful, you guys. That is powerful. It joins you into covenant with God. Whew. That's powerful. I hope you guys see that. And see, that's why I talked about in Malachi 3:10 that when we tithe, he opens up the windows of heaven and pours us out a blessing that we can't contain it, because it binds us into covenant with God. And yeah, not only says that, but he says, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sake. So that the fruit of your field shall not be cast before her vine. Meaning your increase will not be spoiled. But that's what Jacob was doing here. He was making a vow with God. He was making a covenant with God, saying, look, everything you give to me, I will give back to you a tenth of everything you give me. Tying himself with God. Okay, let me just show you one last thing here. Now again, like I said, this was before he was wealthy, but now he made this vow to tithe to God. And I'll go to Genesis chapter 30 and verse 43. By the way, this is just a side note, you guys, but I've noticed this. Whenever we begin talking about things, whether it's talking about the tithe and the offering like this, whether it's talking about, the sacrifice that Jesus made, whether it's talking about having greater reverence for him, greater fear of the Lord. I've noticed this every time we begin talking about that reverence for him and giving him more honor, giving greater honor to the tithe, giving greater honor to the Lord, giving greater honor to his word, giving greater honor to his sacrifice. Every time we do that, I just feel the anointing and the presence of God coming so much stronger every time that we do that. Nothing to do with the offering message for tonight, but boy, that's powerful to me. That's telling me, hey, look, the greater reverence that we show for him, the greater the manifestation of his presence in our lives. Okay, Genesis 30, verse 43. Now again, Jacob makes this vow, this covenant with God to give him a tithe of all that God gives him. And now here it is, just 2 chapters later, and it says, and the man, talking about Jacob, and the man increased exceedingly. Now in the margin there, it says prospered. In other words, and the man prospered. And he had much cattle, or large flocks of cattle, and maidservants and men servants, and camels and asses or donkeys. And so, in other words, he made the covenant with God to tithe and to give him a tenth of everything that God would give to him. And because he honored the Lord in that way, God blessed him and he prospered him supernaturally. Now, I know we've gotten, geez, okay, that's okay. This is important stuff. So we're taking a longer time on it tonight, and that's okay. Because I'm telling you guys, I just have been sensing such an anointing on our offering messages, so I'm not going to rush through them because this is important stuff that we have to see. But I want to show you guys this. Now, this might shake some of you up a little bit. I know it shook me up. But if any of you guys have heard of, Bible scholars refer to the law of first mention, meaning in the Bible, the first time a word or a phrase is mentioned in the Bible, the rest of the Bible carries through with that same definition of that first mention of the word. So whether that first word be grace or it be, faith or whatever, just the law of the first mention of that word or that phrase or whatever it might happen to be. Okay. Now, this is crazy. Okay, this is crazy, but I saw this here. Now, just continuing on here in chapter 31 and verse 1 of Genesis, it says, and he heard the words of Laban's sons. Now talking about Jacob, because again, verse previous, just talk about how God had prospered him so greatly. And so now here it says he heard Laban's son saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. Now, and remember how this all happened. God gave him wisdom on what to do here. Because this is where, Laban had been keeping him, working for him. First, he, kept him for 7 years to get his daughter Rachel. Then he, pulled a fast one on him and gave him Leah. Then he makes him work for him for another 7 years. And so then finally he's like, hey, look, how about this? Send me on my way. I'll just take whatever cattle and animals are speckled and spotted, because those were considered the lesser of the animals. And so then, Lord showed him to take him over to the river and he cut the branches and made it so they would constantly be seeing spots and speckles. And so all these animals then became spotted and speckled. And so he walked away with that huge flock of cattle and sheep and all these different things. And so now here he says, he hears Laban's son saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. And of that which was our father's, has he gotten all this glory? Now, this is the first time the word glory is used in the Bible. Look it up, but do this research for yourself. Go in and dig into this. I mean, this is crazy. But when I look in the margin of my Bible, there's a little number 2 next to the word glory. And the definition of that word glory is wealth. So the first time the word glory was ever used in the Bible, it was referring to wealth. And when we say the glory of God, we always think the presence of God. And that's true too. Nobody's saying that's not true. But the very first time glory was used, it was talking about wealth. And to me, that can make a lot of sense, because when you think of the glory of God, you think, I mean, he owns everything. He owns it all. And you think about all the beauty and all the glorious, just beautiful diamonds and jewels and all the things that the Bible describes, especially when you get into things like the book of Revelation, of the Revelation. I mean, it just talks about all the beautiful stones and how everything in heaven is just streets of gold, and everything is just so rich, so wealthy, so over the top. And that's God. That's God. Praise the Lord. So, hey, I wasn't intending to go quite that long. That's a whole message in itself. But boy, that covenant with God, how tithing is it's a covenant action binding us to God. It's so powerful when He showed me that. And we treat it as holy. And we give the Lord and our tithes and our offerings the reverence that He demands. So let's pray over the offering and our tithes here. Father, we thank you for your word tonight. We thank you, Lord, that the tithe is holy, and that in our tithing we have covenanted with you. We have entered into a covenant with you, that everything that you give to us, we give back to you, a tenth as the tithe, and free will offerings on top of that. Out of our love for you, out of our commitment and our covenant with you, out of our worship to you. And we thank you, Lord, that you always pour out more to us than we ever do to you, because that is your nature, to give and to bless and to love. And we thank you for it. We bless every tithe, every offering, and we thank you for a supernatural return of 30 and 60 and 100-fold return on every seed sown. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay. Boy. Now, here's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I really believe that it was intentional in terms of what we just discussed here with this offering message, because it really ties in with what we're going to discuss tonight. Now, a few weeks back, we had started talking on the subject of authority. And I began my first message, and then Stacy continued that and shared a bit more on that. And the Lord instructed me to come back to that tonight, because we have a lot more to cover there in that area. And especially in light of what we were discussing last week, with the book of Job, and and everything that took place there, especially some of the questions and some of the discussion we had at the end, this is going to help with that a lot. This is going to clear even more things up tonight. But before that, just as a reminder, what we discussed the very first week was, we began talking in Genesis with the fall of man, how first, God created man in his image and in his likeness, and he blessed man, and he gave man dominion and authority. And it said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. And then, of course, we know that the serpent came, tempted, and when that fall took place, now that blessing was turned into a curse. Faith was turned into fear. And all of that authority was turned over to Satan in the realm of the earth. And then we began talking about the sacrifice that Jesus made to restore our authority. And we talked about Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14 and 15, how he came in the form, or he came in flesh and blood, like we were, that he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver them who through all their lifetime were subject to bondage. And then we talked about in the book of John, chapter 10, how Jesus said, I have the power to lay my life down. I can lay it down and I can take it back up again. No one has the power to take my life but me. See, they didn't kill him. He laid his life down. And he even said to him, before he was going to the cross, you would have no power, but it were given to you by my Father in heaven. And then we talked about 2 Corinthians 5:17 through 21, how he became sin that we might become the righteousness of God. And then we talked about Isaiah 52:14, where it says that when he went upon the cross and he made that ultimate sacrifice, that his appearance was marred more than any other man. And in the complete Jewish Bible, it says, just as many were appalled at him because he was so disfigured that he didn't even seem human. And he simply no longer looked like a man. See, because he literally became sin. He didn't just take the sin upon himself, which that alone would have been bad enough. But he became sin. That's what it says in 2 Corinthians 5. He became sin. Every sickness, every disease, every evil. He literally became that. And all of that sin, all of that sickness, all of that disease, all of that evil, it literally disfigured him to the point where he did not even look like a human being anymore. And I bring this up because it's important that we understand the sacrifice that Jesus made to restore the authority back to us as believers that had once been given to Satan during the fall. He came back as a man. He didn't have to do that. Satan had no power or authority over Jesus. He only had authority over man. And that's why it had to be a man that came back to pay the price. A man had to be justified to pay the price for that sin. And he willingly did that for us so that our authority in the earth could be restored. That's how much he loves you. That's how much he loves me. Now, and there was more. I don't want to go into everything that we talked about, but I at least wanted to lay, just as a reminder of the sacrifice that he made for our authority to be restored. Now, let's go to Mark chapter 11, please. Thank you, Lord. Okay. This is powerful. Oh man, this is powerful. Okay. Now, this is right after, I'm not going to go through and rehash all this, but this is right after Jesus spoke to the fig tree and gave, his powerful teaching on faith in verses 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. And so after he does that, now we pick it up in verse 27. And it says, and they come again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, there come to him the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And they say unto him, by what authority doest thou these things? Now, so they obviously heard what he did to the fig tree. Because he speaks to the fig tree, it dries up from the roots. And now they go and they walk into the temple and they've already heard about it. And they're questioning him, well, where'd you get the authority to do this? Who gave you this authority? So they say unto him, by what authority doest thou these things? And who gave you this authority to do these things? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I also will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. And then he goes in and asks us about the baptism of John, and they're too afraid to answer. So he doesn't tell them. But what I want you to see here is they say, well, who gave you this authority. See, authority is given. Okay? Authority is given. Go to Luke chapter 10. And now here in chapter 10, he had just commissioned the 70 out, and they all come back. And in verse 17, it says, and the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through your name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. So he's given a clue here now. He said, I saw Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you power. Now, the word power is translated authority. If you look in the margin, at least in my Bible, in the margin, it says authority. And depending on the translation you're reading, it probably says authority there. But he says, behold, I give unto you power or authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. And nothing shall by any means hurt you. Now here's the key phrase. Behold, I give you. See, authority is given. Now, the power of the authority that you have is dependent on the one that gives you that authority. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, the mayor of your city writes a letter and authorizes you to go and do such and such a thing, and writes you a letter certified that, hey, he or she has delegated that authority to you for you to go out and carry out that command that he or she has given. Now you're going to have a level of authority based on the authority that that mayor has. Now, if that mayor is delegating you and telling you to go out and do something that he or she does not have the authority to do, that authority is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to accomplish anything. It's not going to get anything done. But now say, for example, the President of the United States authorizes you and gives you authority to work on his behalf, to represent him in that task that you've been delegated to do. Well, now you have the authority on the level of the President of the United States. In the same manner, when Jesus delegated to us his authority, we have authority on the level of the one that gave the authority to us. So now, as we are here on the earth, we are representing Jesus So when we speak in his name, it is just the same as if he spoke those words himself. Now, being that he has given the authority to us, that means it's a gift. And if he has given it to us, that means we have it. That means we have it now. You have it right now. You have the authority of Jesus right now. But it's up to us what we do with that authority. It's up to us what we do with it. Go to Matthew chapter 16, please. I'll look this one up real quick in the, let's see. Matthew. Oops. Okay, first let me read it to you in the do this. Okay. Let's look at verse 18, Matthew 16, verse 18. And I say also unto thee that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now, I want to read this to you out of the CEV translation. So I will call you Peter, which means a rock. On this rock I will build my church, and death itself will not have any power over it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And God in heaven will allow whatever you allow on earth. But he will not allow anything that you don't allow. Now, what he's saying here is he's saying, listen, I've given you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. I've given you the authority of my name. I've given you the power to use my name. I've given you the authority and the power to speak on my behalf. That means what I can do, you can do. But it's up to us. Because he says, listen, whatever you allow, I will allow. But whatever you do not allow, I will not allow. You see that? So, in other words, he's saying, listen, I've given you my authority. I'm going to back up whatever you say. I'm going to back up whatever you do. Whatever you allow, I'm going to back you up. And I'm going to allow that too. But whatever you don't allow, I'm going to back you up, and I'm not going to allow that either. But see, it's up to us to use the authority that he has given us. See, it's up to us to use the authority that he has given us. Now, I've said this many, many times, but listen, it's such a powerful revelation, you guys. I saw like this. I saw, listen, okay. If it's not allowed in heaven, it's not allowed in my life. If it's not allowed in heaven, it's not allowed in my life. So if there is no sickness in heaven, there's no sickness allowed in my life. If there's no poverty in heaven, then there's no poverty allowed in my life. If there's no strife in heaven, there's no strife allowed in my life. Do you see that? But we have to be the ones to make that stand. Because we have a personal responsibility to take what he has given us and for us to use it. So we have to be the one to take that stand, that as sickness is to start coming against us, no! We say, no! If it's not allowed in heaven, it's not allowed in my life. If it's not allowed in heaven, it is not allowed in my life. See, that's what I had to do. I was having there were issues going on with my prostate, and it was going on and on and on, and go to all these doctor appointments and doing all these tests, and they're poking around and doing a whole lot of uncomfortable stuff. And I had to take that stand, and I had to say, wait a minute now. It's not allowed in heaven. It can't be allowed in my life. And I'm going to tell you, the Lord showed me this to take it even a step further. Okay? Because like I said, I say, hey, if it's not allowed in heaven, it's not allowed in my life. But then the Lord showed it to me even a step further. And he showed it to me as, if it can't touch God, it can't touch me. If it can't touch God, it can't touch me. Why? Because I made it in his image. I've been born of God. He made me. He said, I'm just like him. He said, I was created in his image and in his likeness, just like him. And I have his divine nature. When I became born again, my spirit became one with his spirit. So it's no longer I who live. It's now Christ who lives in me. So if it can't touch God, it can't touch me. I said, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. Prostate problems can't touch God. No, they can't touch him. And I started standing on that. I started doing my healing confessions. And I started getting better and better and better and better. It just started increasing and getting better and increasing and getting better and getting better. It wasn't instant. No, it wasn't the way that it worked. It took probably a few months. But it completely changed because of the authority that he delegated to us. I wasn't speaking out of my own authority. No. I was speaking under the authority of the one that gave me the authority. Do you see that? Our authority is dependent on the one that gave it to us. I mean, that's powerful. See, okay, look where Matthew, just flip over to Matthew chapter 8. In verse 16. When the even was come, even evening, you could say, when the evening was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils. And he cast out the spirits with his word. And he healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. See, he cast out those spirits with his word. So if he can do that, we can do that. And he healed all their infirmities. So we now have the ability to walk in the same authority that Jesus has, because he gave it to us. He said, behold, I give unto you authority. In Matthew 28:18, right before he ascends into heaven, he says to the disciples, hey, look, all power, all authority in heaven and in earth has been given unto me. Go ye therefore. See, and he commissions them out in his name and in his authority. That's what he's done for us. He's commissioned us out in his power and his all power in heaven and in earth has been given unto him. And he gave us the right to use that authority. That's powerful. Please go to Ephesians chapter 5. Verse 1. Be ye therefore followers of God as dear children, and walk in love, as Christ also has loved us, and has given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling savor. See, now again, he's saying here that Jesus gave himself for us as a sacrifice so that we could be like him, that our authority, that our identity could be restored. Now I want to look at this in, let's see, hold on, in the Amplified. Oops. Five. Oops. Okay. Go Amplified Classic. Okay, now this says, therefore be imitators of God. Copy him and follow his example, as well-beloved children imitate their father. See, he wants us to copy him, to imitate him, to be just like him. And walk in love, esteeming and delighting in one another as Christ loved and gave himself up for us, a slain offering and sacrifice to God for you, so that it became a sweet fragrance. So he is telling us to be imitators of God, to follow him, to copy his example. Well, what did God do? What did Jesus do? We just read what Jesus did in Matthew chapter 8. He spoke to the devils with his word and commanded them to come out. He used his words to execute his authority. See, remember, we were talking earlier. Power of the words we speak. Because our authority is in our words. Look, we go back to Genesis chapter 1, and we can look at exactly how God created everything. In fact, go here, go to let's see, I think it's Psalm, I want to say it's Psalm 33. Let me look here real quick, hold on. Is it 33? What is it? Yes, okay, here we go. Yeah, okay. Okay, Psalm 33. Okay, let's just start in verse 4. We'll read a couple verses here just to, as long as we're here. For the word of the Lord is right, and all his works are done in truth. He loves righteousness and judgment. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Now, that word goodness, by the way, in my margin, it's translated loving kindness. Loving kindness. The loving kindness. The earth is full of the loving kindness of the Lord. The earth is full of the loving kindness of the Lord. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. He gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the depth in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. Oh, man! Oh, I mean, man, that's powerful. Hey, he spoke, and it was. He spoke, and it was done. That's it. Is that not what Jesus did with the fig tree? Come on, he spoke to that fig tree. He never gave it a second thought. Why? Because he spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. So he knew when he spoke to that fig tree, that was it. It was over for that tree. And even the next morning, when they came to the tree, Peter was like, Lord, look at the fig tree. Look at this. Look. Jesus didn't even pay it any attention. He didn't even address it. Why? Because he spoke and it was done. What more attention does he need to place upon it? He knew that when he spoke to that tree, that was it. See, he wants us to copy him, follow him as his example, imitate him, be just like him. In other words, use your words, speak, and let it be done. Command it and let it stand fast. See, too often we speak it and then we go back and we say things that are contrary to what we just spoke. Negating our own words, negating our own authority that he's given us. The power that he has given us a right to use here on this earth. He spoke and it was done. And in fact, watch this. Okay, now look at this now. Look at this. Okay, now the word done is in italics. That means the translators, at their discretion, put it in. It wasn't actually there, but they put it in there. So that means we can take that out. So watch this. He spoke and it was. hey, listen. He spoke and it was. Hey, he spoke and it was. That's it. He spoke and it was. He spoke and it was. He spoke and it was. That's it. And that's what he's telling us to do. Imitate him, copy him, follow his example, speak. And it is. But we have to believe in our words the way that he believed in his words. That's what he's calling us. Copy him, follow his example, be just like him. You are so much more powerful than you realize. Your thoughts, your words are so much more powerful than you realize. Use them for your benefit and don't go back on. Always use your words to speak faith, to speak what you desire to happen, not what you don't desire. Stop speaking the things you don't desire to happen. Speak only what you desire. Stand firm on the authority that he has given you. Because you have the right to use his authority. He has given it to you. So whatever you allow, he's going to allow. And whatever you don't allow, he won't allow it. He will step in and he will put an end to it. He will put an end to it. He will fight for you. He will fight on your behalf. He will back up your words just as if he said it himself, as long as it lines up with the word of God. Praise the Lord. Okay. Let me just real quick. A couple other translations I wanted to share of this. Ephesians 5:1. Okay, read the Amplified Classic. Oh, CEV. Do as God does. After all, you are his dear children. The Living Bible says, follow God's example in everything you do, just as a much loved child imitates his father. Okay, let me go to one more scripture and then we'll close. We'll close on this one here. End on this one. Go to James chapter 4, verse 7. Well, hold on. Okay, let's go. Let's just start in verse 6. Well, okay, let's just start in verse 1. From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even of your own lusts that war in your members? You lust and you have not. You kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you have not, because you ask not. You ask and receive not, because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your own lusts. See, that's what we're talking about. Our words have to be in line with the word of God. You adulterers and adulteresses, know you not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do you think that the scripture says in vain, the spirit that dwells in us lusts to envy? But he gives more grace. Wherefore he says, God resists the proud, but he gives, remember, he gives. He's always giving. He's always blessing you. He's always giving to you. But he gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be afflicted and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Now, I want to look at verse 7 here. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Now, we can't just resist the devil. You can't just resist lust or resist sickness or resist lack or strife or anger or whatever. We have to first submit to God. See? In order to receive authority, you have to submit to that one that has the authority. Otherwise, their authority can never be delegated to you. You have to first submit to God. See, you're going to have the authority of whoever you submit to. But you have to submit to that one in order to receive their authority. So now watch this. When you first submit to God and then resist the devil, now you're resisting the devil in God's power and God's authority. But if we skip that first part and we just go straight to resisting the devil, now you're going to be trying to resist him in your own strength. And you will get whooped every time. Because you're no match on your own. But with God, he's no match for you. See that? But see, that's what we have to first make sure we're staying submitted to God and his authority so that we are resisting from that place of power and authority, from the place of God's power and God's authority, and not from our own strength. You see that? The Amplified says, for James 4:7, so submit to the authority of God. See, we have to first submit to his authority. We have to submit to his authority and say, Lord, I'm yours to command. We have to be willing to do what he says to do. And if he says, okay, I want you to resist in this way, then we have to do it that way that he says. We can't make it up and do it our own way. We have to do things according to God's ways. So we have to submit to the authority of God. See, Isaiah 55:8 says, his ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. See, so we have to submit to his higher ways because he always knows the way that will win. He always knows the way that is best. He always knows the way that's going to get the job done. So we have to submit to his authority so that we can walk in his authority. Because if we will not submit to his authority, we cannot walk in his authority. So the Amplified says, so submit to the authority of God. Resist the devil. Stand firm against him, and he will flee from you. Okay, the God's Word translation says, so place yourselves under God's authority. Resist the devil, and he will run away from you. Why? Because God has so much power over Satan that he fell from heaven as lightning. Think about how fast that is. I mean, just think about how fast that is. That's how fast God kicked him out of heaven. The Complete Jewish Bible says, therefore submit to God. Moreover, take a stand against the adversary, and he will flee from you. And lastly, the NIRV says, so obey God. Stand up to the devil. He will run away from you. See, we have to stand up to him. We have to stand up to him. You can't be afraid of fear. You can't be afraid of sickness. We can't be afraid of what the enemy might try to do. But we don't stand up to him in our own strength or in our own power or in our own authority. No. We stand up to him in God's power, in God's strength, in God's authority. Because he has delegated his authority to us, the use of his name to us, the use of his word to us. And we stand and we exercise that power and that authority, knowing that God's power, God's authority is far greater than the devil and anything that he might try to do. Praise God. That's what I've got for you guys. I trust that was a blessing to you. Now let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word tonight. We thank you that you have given us your power and your authority, that you have delegated it to us, that you have given us the right to use your name, to use your authority, to use your power, to use your word. Thank you, Lord. We submit to your authority. We stand as soldiers and we say, Lord, command ye me. Tell me what to do. I'm yours to command. Whatever you instruct, we will do it. Whatever you instruct, we will do it. Everything that we have came from you, so we are yours to command. Do with us, Lord, as you see fit. And we will execute it in Jesus' mighty name.